I uncovered the terrifying truth about a prince buried alive by his father. I never should have opened that door. It seemed like a simple enough choice, a whimsical curiosity pulling me toward the forgotten cellar of my grandmother's ancient house. The creaky stairs moaned beneath my weight as I descended into the suffocating darkness. A chill wrapped around me, crawling against my skin, whispering secrets from years long past. The air was thick with dust and something else, something rotten, something foreboding. This place felt haunted, as if the very walls could recall the secrets of those who had walked before me. Shadows danced in the flickering light of my phone, twisting like tortured spirits. I could almost hear them whispering, drowning out my nervous breaths. Every drop of water echoing from the ceiling sent a jolt through my already frayed nerves, and I squinted into the abyss, searching for what lay ahead. I'd heard the stories growing up. Tales of a prince, not just any prince, but one who had been ripped from life in an act of betrayal. Buried by his father's own hand, the story went. Was there truth in those tales? The idea twisted in my stomach like a snake, biting deep. I stepped forward, driven by a grotesque mix of dread and intrigue. Then I heard it. A soft, dragging sound. My heart raced. It was too close. I froze, rooted in place. A chill sliced through me, colder than any winter night I remembered. There it was again, a scraping, like fingernails against a surface. I glanced around, my stomach churning that I could see something ahead, something half buried in the damp earth. I stumbled closer, my pulse hammering in my ears. My light flickered and then died, plunging me into suffocating darkness. Panic threatened to swallow me whole. Cold sweat trickled down my back. I could almost taste the fear. Then, just as I turned to run, I felt it. A hand ice-cold and clammy clasped around my wrist. I gasped, the air rushing out of my lungs. I swung around, ready to scream, but there was nothing there. Just shadows. The whispers swelled, a cacophony of voices that left my skin crawling. I backed away, my heart in my throat, when I stumbled over something hard and unyielding. A coffin. Not just any coffin, but ornate, gilded, a royal seal engraved on the lid. The dragging noise returned, louder now. It was coming from inside. What was I about to uncover? I unclenched my fingers, and the darkness engulfed me once more. A piercing scream erupted from nowhere, sending a jolt of terror straight to my bones. The cellar door slammed shut above me, locking me in with whatever haunted the shadows. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The silence that followed was deafening, wrapping around me like a shroud. I stood frozen, every muscle tensed for flight, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The coffin loomed before me, its presence a grotesque reminder of the fate that had befallen the prince. What secrets lay inside? The shadows around me thickened, feeding off my fear. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet began to tremble, a low vibration reverberating through the earth. The scratching noise escalated into a frantic series of thuds. I pressed my back against the wall, desperately searching for an escape, but the cellar was a tomb. A hallowed grave with no windows, no light, and no way out. The coffin shifted, the hinges creaking ominously, as though awakening from a long slumber. I could almost hear the whisper of ancient incantations swirling in the damp air, beckoning me closer. Those tales I once dismissed, was I truly about to witness their horror brought to life? My breath quickened. I felt the temperature drop, iciness seeped into my bones. Squinting into the darkness, I saw the lid of the coffin tremble as if a hand were pressing against the other side. Then came a voice, soft and choked, almost melodic yet filled with an insatiable hunger. Help me please. In that moment, I felt a connect-iona bond forged of shared desperation. But with it came an undercurrent of malevolence, a darkness that seemed to seep from the coffin and seep into my thoughts. My instincts screamed at me to run, but the horrifying plea wrapped around my heart like threads of silk suffocating a butterfly. Help me, I cannot breathe, the voice begged again, now thick with a raspy edge, each word coated in despair. It was a call that ensnared me, even as it twisted my gut with dread. I took a cautious step forward, inching toward the gilt coffin. Just then, a violent crash above sent reverberations racing through the cellar. The air grew dense with the echo of thunder, while dust rained down from the ceiling. Something was wrong, something far worse was coming. The voice shrieked and echoed, morphing into a cacophony of cries that ricocheted off the walls. Release me. I stumbled back, my heart thundering against my ribs. The coffin lurched open, revealing darkness, an inky void swirling with whispers of curses and regret. I locked eyes with a figure within, a man with hauntingly familiar features, pale and gaunt. The prince. But his eyes were not the bright orbs of a royal, they were sunken and filled with a terror that transcended time. His mouth twisted into a primal scream as he extended a skeletal hand toward me, desperation radiating like heat from his form. Help me. My father, he will find you. The words clawed their way from his throat, fragmented and desperate. I was torn between horror and sympathy for this tortured soul. Could I truly help him, or would this be my demise? Before I could answer, shadows began to swirl around us, taking shape, shifting and writhing with a life of their own. The whispers crescendoed into a sycophantic chorus of anguished wails. I could see figures forming, twisted shadows climbing out from the very walls of my nightmares. The air thickened with their despair-lost souls tethered to the legacy of violence that had birthed this horror. That I felt the presence of unseen eyes watching me from the darkness, waiting for my move. I dropped my flashlight, which cracked and sputtered out, plunging me into a Stygian blackness where my fearful breaths were the only signs of life. As the shadows closed in, the prince's eyes gleamed like molten silver. You must bear witness, he rasped, or you will join us. With a spine-chilling crack, the earth surged beneath me, and I lost my balance, tumbling toward the coffin. I reached out to steady myself, but as I fell into its embrace, the lid crashed shut with a thunderous finality. Darkness enveloped me, and as fingers of icy despair wrapped around my throat, a voice hissed in my ear, the prince has found another. My heart sank as the cellar shook once more, a prelude to an unknown terror. The walls began to bleed shadows, swirling into a vortex of despair. What awaited me in this suffocating dark? Just as my sanity gripped to the edge of oblivion, I felt something clawing from below, pulling me further into the depths. And then, in the soul-chilling silence that followed, I heard it again. The prince's voice echoing in the void, more determined yet, release me or lose your soul. I screamed, the darkness swallowing my cry as fingers, never-ending and unseen, reached into the shadows, claiming my presence in unholy silence. As the final echoes of my scream faded, I felt the air around me shift. The icy chill intensified. It wasn't the cold of death but the creeping touch of something else, something ancient and wrong. The whispering shadows entwined with the darkness of the coffin, their breath chilling and insatiable. It suffocated me, clinging to my senses, until I could no longer distinguish between my thoughts and the sinister murmurings that slithered through the void. Time is a fragile thread, the prince's voice reverberated, a haunting symphony that morphed into an ominous chant. Beneath me, the depths pulsed, as if the very ground were alive, a rotting heart that thudded in sync with the dread that coursed through my veins. You belong to me now. We are bound by blood and sin. That I clawed at the walls of my mind, trying to retrieve my sanity, to cling desperately to the fractured remnants of hope. But my limbs felt tethered, the weight of unseen chains grasping at my wrists and throat, squeezing tighter with every whisper. I remembered the legends, those harrowing tales of the cursed bloodline, the price of power, the madness that claimed those who touched it. A flurry of shadows flitted past me, phantoms, remnants of the past that danced upon the edge of my vision. They were voices of despair crafted from anguish and regret, each one punctuated by the prince's insistent call that grew louder and more demanding. Help me. Free me. Or be lost. My mind frantically raced through fragments of memories, of warnings passed down through hushed voices and candlelit stories in the dead of night. I could feel the weight of their anguish press against me, tangled in the dark roots of this wretched place. The prince wasn't merely a victim, he had become an architect of suffering, and now sought to ensnare me in his curse. As I whimpered, desperation clawing at my throat, I suddenly felt the ground begin to give way beneath me. The shadows roared to life, swirling into a cyclone that threatened to swallow me whole. I tumbled downwards, the darkness shifting, contorting at my will as I cried out for help. Join us, a voice whispered in my ear, wrapped in satin. I recoiled, recognizing this voice, one I thought belonged to a long-lost sister. She had vanished into the very shadows that now cradled my fear, her laughter once bright now twisted into chilling echoes of mockery. We've waited so long for you. I shut my eyes tight, battling against the memories, a flood that threatened to drown me. For just above, the prince screamed my name, a desperate cry laced with betrayal. Do you not see? My father, he buried me alive, but your sacrifice could set us both free. The shadowy figure emerged from the swirling chaos, a woman, her visage hauntingly familiar, with eyes like eternal night and hair like shadows cast under a crescent moon. Her presence radiated sorrow, and her mouth twisted into a smile that betrayed an unfathomable hunger. Welcome back, dear sister, she cooed, her voice a mixture of velvet and poison. The eternal home awaits. Before I could grasp the impossibility of her words, I was pulled deeper into the vortex. My senses were overwhelmed, I felt ethereal fingers trace my skin, exploring every quivering nerve. The walls of the coffin had vanished, replaced by a vast abyss where they dwelled and watched, a dark congregation waiting for my final submission. I felt my resolve waver, and panic wrestled with a forbidden urge to succumb to the darkness, to join my phantom kin. But as the clamor around me crescendoed, that desperate need to fight surged anew. My heart pounded, my last shred of sanity flickered like a fragile flame. A voice cut through the din, clearer than the Res-10 echo from somewhere outside the consuming void. You must decide before it is too late. I surged against the tide of shadows, battling against the encroaching madness and those icy fingers that reached for my very soul. The figure of the prince hovered at the edge of my consciousness, a phantom begging for deliverance, his eyes swirling with both fear and fury. I gasped as, out of nowhere, light flickered in the corner of my vision. An escape, a fleeting hope shining through the darkness, but as I reached desperately for it, the sinister laughter of the woman echoed in my ears. You think they can save you? You belong to us. In that terrifying instant, I felt my vision fragment, reality spiraling into chaos. As I reached for the light, the world shattered around me, plunging me further into the abyss. My last thought, as that chilling laughter enveloped me, was of betrayal, and the realization that the prince's cries were not for liberation, they were a beckoning invitation to join a darkness deeper than death. Then silence fell, thick as a fog, wrapping around me as I was dragged further into the shadowy depths. And then I heard it, an anguished shriek echoing around me, a sound filled with both despair and rage, resonating louder than anything I had ever encountered before. Your choice has been made. The shadows answered. The silence that enveloped me felt alive, pulsating with a rhythm that was both dreadful and mesmerizing. I fought against the darkness constricting my mind, but the pull was too strong, drawing me into the clutches of a deeper horror below. I was submerged in a weightless void, caught between moments of fleeting clarity and oppressive shadow, and then, like a whisper carried on the wind, the memory of my sister came crashing back, shrouded in anguish and longing. They will take you, too, she had warned me, her voice a haunting echo from years lost. I remembered her pale face, the last flicker of light in her once vibrant eyes as she vanished into the shadows, a flickering candle snuffed out by the chilling breath of night. I will not follow you. I screamed into the abyss, desperation clawing at my throat. Yet, to my horror, the voice that rose to meet my proclamation was not my own. it belonged to the very shadows, the essence of what claimed to be my kin. They echoed my sentiment back to me, mocking my defiance. You will. You shall. Something shifted in the darkness, a cold, predatory awareness, and the walls of my surroundings began to pulse as if cognizant of my struggle. I felt monstrous eyes fixate on me from the depths, each glare a piercing shard of malice that chiseled away at my resolve. The air thickened, roiling with energy that sparked with sinister intention, a fraying thread holding together my sanity, fraying more with every heartbeat. Suddenly, the darkness pressed closer, encasing me, exploring not just my flesh, but probing for the very fabric of my soul. Gasping, I fought the instinct to surrender, but dread dug its talons deep. I could see flickers of shapes within the gloom, twisted faces of the cursed, mouths stretched into rictus grins, all of them whispering the same mantra. Join us. Set us free. Then, through the oppressive gloom, a bright rip sliced the air, a sudden outpouring of incandescent light. It blinded me momentarily, and then I saw a figure standing amidst flickers of luminescence. The prince stood before me, his face twisted in both pain and yearning. You must choose, sister. He cried, anguish etched into his features. Open the path, only you can reclaim what was lost. I felt the tug of his urgency, yet the shadows around me surged, narrowing their crushing grip. Their whispers intensified, a wicked cacophony of dread, laced with the remnants of countless regrets. Foolish girl, do you think he can save you? He is as much a prisoner as you. With every word, my heart pounded with doubt. Perfectly poised between the shimmering light and the entwining darkness, I felt the tether of my very essence fray further, the shadows attempting to lure me in with promises of power and belonging. I could hear my sister's laughter rippling through the silencia, song once sweet, now an eerie requiem that beckoned me closer. Your sister is lost. The shadows hissed, flickers of her deceit weaving through their forms. Embrace the truth of your lineage. You were never meant to escape. Enough. I shouted, voice splintering at the edges. I will choose my own path. I surged towards the prince, desperate to bridge the gap between light and darkness, to reclaim whatever shred of humanity that remained. But the shadows recoiled at my defiance, a sudden gust of rancid wind spiraling in rage. They coiled around the prince, a writhing mass intent on suffocating his light. I could see the panic rising in his eyes, a desperate call for help that pitted our destinies against one another. You cannot save me without succumbing to their will, but I refuse to relent. Crenellated fingers of dark clawed eagerly at my skin as I lunged towards the luminescence of the prince. I will not let you take him. I shouted, flinging open my arms, feeling the pulse of ancestral power surge through me like molten lava. My resolve ignited a fierce glow that momentarily shattered the consuming darkness. In that fleeting instant of clarity, I heard a new whisper amongst the shadows, one that sent chills through my spine. Accept what you are, sister, or watch him be consumed. The shadows convulsed violently, drawing tighter around us as a chorus of anguished shrieks harmonized into an unbearable crescendo. With the prince caught in the encroaching mass, I realized we were no longer merely fighting for our lives, we were wrestling against destinies intricately woven by blood and fate. Then, out of nowhere, I felt a crushing force behind me, a black apparition extending its claws with a constricting grip that was unmistakably familiar. My sister's face twisted in torment, merging fearfully with the shadows around her. You are mine, her voice echoed, an agony that caved my heart. Before I could grasp the weight of those words, a searing pain erupted from within. I felt vibrant warmth bleed from my Korean, excruciating reminder of what I could lose. The light that flickered between us dimmed dangerously. My grasp on hope slipped. No. My scream tore through the remnants of darkness as I fought against her, against the shadows that threatened to engulf us all. But the darkness grew, swallowing the light, smothering the last traces of warmth as my eyes widened in horror. The laughter resurfaced, booming all around us as I felt everything slip away, the future, the past, even the prince himself. Just as I lost grip, a final echo resounded, a shattered promise, a flickering truth. You were never meant to choose. You were meant to join us. And then silence, a silence darker than the void that devoured me, as I felt myself start to forget everything, my name, my purpose, and the last lingering warmth of hope, but just as the darkness closed in completely, a single word seeped through the void, a stuttering breath that lingered like smoke. Sister, and then I felt it. Something cold, something infinitely more sinister than before, uncoiling in the dark. It was a presence beyond comprehension, and I knew, in that moment of dreadful clarity, that all was lost. Your truth is exposed, the shadows whispered, and as they tightened their grasp, the last flicker of light vanished, leaving me in a void where unimaginable horrors awaited. My senses flickered back like a dying light bulb, and for a moment, I was lost in a warped memory of sunlight and laughter. But then the shadows lurched, snatching me back to the reality of my hell. The darkness wrapped around me like a wet shroud, suffocating and oppressive, filling my mind with an icy dread that I was no longer suspended amidst choices. I was immersed in what felt like a living nightmare, where every breath I took was tainted with despair. The echo of my sister's plea still hovered, curling around me like smoke. Sister, she had called, but now it felt as though it had come from the very heart of darkness itself. It urged me onward, deeper into the consuming maw of night. With each step, I stumbled through shadows that danced around me, stretching unnaturally across the ground as though they were alive, sentient. An unseen force pulled at my legs, slowly dragging me backward into their realm, whispering cursed promises that made my skin crawl. You will not escape what you are, they hissed, their voices intermingling with the sinister laughter that echoed endlessly. The shadows formed grotesque shapes that writhed and shifted, a twisted tapestry of what had once been human. Stop. Get away. I screamed, my voice drowning beneath the caustic onslaught. I swept my hands through the foggy gloom, trying to push back the encroaching darkness that sought to claim me. But every flick of my fingers only drew more shadows in, a vortex spiraling around my will, sapping my strength. Just then, a rush of wind swept through, thick with the scent of decay. The air felt oppressive and charged, crackling with malevolence. The longer you resist, the more you lose, the shadows taunted, a chorus of sneering laughter rising to meet my defiance. Your sister knew this truth very well. That I took a deep, shuddering breath, fighting the urge to scream. The room around me dissolved, revealing flashes of images, me sister among others, laughing, dancing in a warm glow, then changing to chaos, her face twisted in agony as shadows enveloped her. They will take you too, she had warned, but I was now in the dark, resisting the inevitable. Suddenly, a sense of vertigo swept through me, as if the floor itself turned liquid beneath my feet. I felt a jolt, and the world fell away until I landed in a cavernous space. It was teeming with twisted figures, shadows of people who had lost themselves long ago, their faces contorted in anguish. They were imprisoned by the very darkness that once emboldened them, now seeking more souls to ensnare. As they hovered and flitted around me, welcome, they chorused, their voices echoing with longing and despair. We've been waiting for you. Their arms reached out, black tendrils bending the light around them, gripping my ankle, my wrist, pulling me closer to the pit of despair. Leave me. I gasped, pulling with all my might. Yet the shadows were relentless, they clasped me tighter, dragging me deeper into their depths, where I could barely breathe, where fear coiled in my stomach like a rabid beast. I kicked and thrashed, the shapes of lost souls merging and blurring, threatening to swallow me whole. Then, within the maelstrom of terror, something cracked, a sharp sound slicing through the noise. The shadows paused, recoiling for an instant, allowing a sliver of piercing light to tunnel through. I squeezed my eyes shut against the brightness, but it was too late. The shadows shrieked, desperately retreating like a tide sucked into the ocean. The light illuminated a crumbling wall behind them, and through the chaos, I saw what appeared to be a mural, ancient and worn, depicting a scene of a prince, encircled by dark figures, his face a mask of horror. The inscription beneath, once eloquent and flowing, had become jagged and eroded, yet the meaning was painfully clear, a foretelling of betrayal intermingled with family ties. Suddenly, the figures began advancing again, more fervently now, and as I turned to escape, dread gripped my heart. A cold hand clasped my shoulder, and I felt icy breath against my neck. Me sister's voice, sweetly malevolent, filled my ear. You can't escape me, dear sister. That I jerked around, heart racing. Before me stood her phantom, a vision of the girl I once cherished, but consumed by darkness. Her eyes were pools swirling with despair, her expression a haunting mix of love and malice. Join me, embrace our destiny. Together, we can dominate the shadows. No. I gasped, but the shadows twisted around me, drowning me in despair as I felt the boundaries of my identity blur further. You've got to fight this, I shouted. But the darkness tightened its grip, closing in around my throat, threatening to blank out all hope. It was then I saw a shimmer of light escaping a crack in the wall, pulsing like a heartbeat, beckoning me toward it. But the shadows screeched in unison, raging against my will, their tendrils lashing out in an attempt to drag me back. As I strained against their pull, the cleansing light flickered alive, illuminating faces of those trapped in shadows, my sister's face amongst them, eyes wide with longing, with sorrow. I stood paralyzed between their world and the light that pulsed with promises of salvation. The cavern trembled, and whispers churned around me like a storm. Choose. Embrace your truth or perish. But know this, the shadows hissed, you cannot choose light without accepting what lies within. And then, silence fell as the ground beneath me began to crack, fissures of darkness yawning wide, ready to swallow everything. Just as the last remnants of hope threatened to dissolve, the echo of my sister's voice roared in furious insistence. Looking into her eyes, swirling with depths I couldn't comprehend, I realized I was on the brink of awakening something ancient and terrible. And all at once, the dark figures lunged toward me, their hands grasping hungrily for my essence, desperate to claim what they believed was theirs. Just as their fingers brushed against my skin, I felt it, an answer, a truth waiting to spill forth, and a scream ripped from my throat, a stark declaration against the darkness. I was not theirs. Then came an earth-shattering explosion of light, filling every corner of the cavern, blinding me as I felt myself being torn apart. And as the black consumed my vision, one thought haunted me: would I return to the light, or be forever lost in the truth of my bloodline? I never saw the truth coming, as the abyss opened like a mouth, ready to swallow everything whole. I drifted in the void, an endless abyss of blackness where time lost its meaning. In this heavy silence, all that remained was the echo of my scream, a haunting reminder of my last stand against the engulfing shadows. Then, from within the depths of nothingness, that blinding light began to flicker. At first, I couldn't comprehend its intensity. My eyes stung, my skin prickled with upon waking from a nightmare only to find the terror gone yet still present all around me. When I finally opened my eyes, reality came crashing back as I lay sprawled on a cold stone floor in a dimly lit chamber, thick with the musty odor of damp earth. A jagged crack in the wall let streams of muted light spill through, illuminating the darkness around me. The shadows, they were no longer chasing me. I was seemingly alone, but the eerie stillness was disconcerting. In the distance, a low, grinding sound reverberated through the very ground, as if the stone itself were moaning in sorrow. I stood cautiously, my heart still galloping, the remnants of fear clinging to my limbs like spider silk. Whispers began to swirl around me, familiar and haunting. They echoed in the corners of my mind, taunting me with memories: childhood laughter, the warmth of autumn days spent with my sister, only to twist tragically with images of her engulfed by darkness. My insides churned with uncertainty. Was this the same chamber that held my sister? Had I been thrust back into the heart of despair? I shuffled tentatively deeper into the chamber, each step sending ripples through the silence, precipitating a sense of impending doom. There was something here, something monstrous, lurking beneath the surface that threatened to reclaim me. As I explored, my gaze fell upon symbols etched into the walls, arcane runes serpentining in an unholy language that seethed with ancient power. Each stroke pulsed with an unwholesome light, shifting shadows as though the carvings themselves had life. I touched the cold stone, and a jolt of energy coursed through me, grounding me while simultaneously awakening dread. No sooner had I pulled my hand away than the air thickened, and the temperature plummeted. With frantic breaths, I turned to retreat, but the shadows surged from the wall, viscous and intent, morphing into grotesque forms that laughed and screeched, echoing the anguish captured in the runes. They beckoned me, reaching out with thorn-like fingers that threatened to rupture my very soul. In a panic, I darted toward the light shone through the crack, praying it would guide me away from the horror closing in. Yet as I neared the exit, icy tendrils wrapped around my ankles, anchoring me in place. The shadows whispered promises laden with malice, "You can't leave. You belong to us." My heart pounded as I wrestled against their grasp, my breath quickening. I turned, desperate to find another path, but what I saw sent every nerve in my body screaming. The walls had come alive, the runes throbbing, pulsating, dark blood trickling from their etched surfaces, pooling at my feet. The very remnants of lost souls fed into the shadows clinging to me. "Help!" I screamed, heedless of the despair cloaked in the shadows, my voice barely a wisp against their cacophony. The dark laughter amplified, swirling like a tempest around me, drowning out my fear with a chilling sense of truth. The chamber wasn't merely a prison, it was a sacrificial altar to ancient forces I could barely grasp. With an unexpected surge of strength, I broke free and dashed toward the crack in the wall, the light exuding with a beckoning urgency. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as I plunged toward my only hope of escape. Just as I reached the fissure, something cold and familiar pricked my mind. "Evelyn," a whisper filled with both love and unholy terror seeped from the shadows. "You'll always be bound to me." I turned, seeing my sister's visage emerge, shimmering grotesquely from the darkness, a reflection of sorrow and malice. Her eyes were swirling voids, and I felt my will dissolve as she raised a hand toward me, beckoning with a painful yearning. The shadows closed in, their mass forming a river around her, drinking in life and hope. "Join me, let us be one," she urged, her voice a twisted harmony of sisterly love and darkness. "Together, we can achieve what was lost. Together we can reign." A surge of dread swelled in my throat, silencing my fear. I could see the flickers of her former self buried deep within the darkness, struggling against the very bindings that sought to intertwine us. And the raw despair in her eyes was a reflection of my own impending doom. Suddenly, a deafening crack reverberated through the chamber. The ground shuddered violently, fissures sprawling outward like veins bleeding darkness, weaving visions of horrors yet unknown and primal fears. I stumbled back, and the shadows paused, a momentary confusion settling upon them. In that fleeting moment, I remembered the sliver of light. I directed all my energy towards it, desperately believing in the possibility of escape, my will manifesting into a blinding force that pushed against the shadows clawing for me. Raw emotion pulsed through my core as I chanted a faint reflection of the inscriptions around me, twisting their perspective, but just as the light shimmered with dazzling brilliance, the shadows reacted in wild fury, their faces contorting into grotesque masks of rage and despair. "You cannot escape your fate, Evelyn," they screamed, and beneath that cacophony, I caught the faintest sound, a heartbeat, steady and resonant, vibrating as if an ancient power was waking. The ground cracked beneath my feet, threatening to send me plunging into an infinite chasm. I turned back to flee, only to be met by my sister's heart-wrenching, anguished look, her face wavering between the light and darkness, dangling between the chaos of the two worlds. Suddenly, the heartbeat surged into an overwhelming roar. A clash between the light and the shadows seemed imminent, and with one last glance back at my sister, I felt myself being drawn closer to that solitary flicker of hope. But what I did not anticipate was that the floor beneath me began to crumble, falling away like dust, dragging everything with it. And with a chilling realization, I understood there would be no escape from either of us. The chamber began to implode, shadows spilling forth as a chasm opened wide, and as the light blinked out with the shadow's hunger, I fell falling deeper into oblivion, into the arms of the darkness that awaited like a lover long missed. Would I awaken into the horror, or would the light reclaim me? The question lingered in the air, a haunting epitaph to the choices yet unmade. And then, shockingly, I heard her voice again, calling to me from the darkness, sweet and seductive. "Sister, come home." With those final words echoing in my mind, I lost everything to the shadows. I plummeted through the cold abyss, my senses dulled by the crushing weight of despair and fear. With each heartbeat, the shadows whispered betrayal, their coiling tendrils wrapping tighter around my essence. A cacophony of screams reverberated around me, each cry a testament to souls lost like mine, the hollow echoes of their torment painting a gruesome portrait of what lay beyond the light. Suddenly, my descent halted with a bone-jarring thud. Raw instinct ignited within me, and I scrambled to my feet, overwhelmed by the pungent stench of decay and despair. I was plunged into darkness so thick it threatened to suffocate me, a graveyard of forgotten dreams and broken spirits. The air crackled with energy, an unsettling premonition intensifying as I navigated this new, shifting terrain. Every crack in the earth seemed to pulse, alive with the memories of those who had been here before me. A chorus of wailing mourned, an orchestra of despair that vibrated through the cool stone. With sluggish determination, I pressed onward, certain this was my only chance at survival, even as the oppressive weight of dread threatened to crush my very bones. As I moved deeper into this wretched domain, I stumbled upon a dimly lit chamber, its walls lined with grotesque, twisted sculptures, faces frozen in agony, their mouths open in silent screams. The fabric of reality shimmered around them, distorting the air. I felt as though the statues might reach out with gnarled fingers, pulling me into their wretched existence. The pulse of the shadows intensified, a morbid synchronization with my own thundering heart. I leaned against a cold stone pillar, desperate to catch my breath. Above me, what appeared to be a swirling cloud of blackness coalesced, shifting like the wings of a giant bat preparing to prey upon its captured meal. Then I saw it, a meteor of light fracturing the gloom, illuminating the faces in the chamber. Only this time, they no longer appeared as grotesque caricatures, but as individuals' faces I recognized. My sister emerged amongst them, a blurred reflection of her former self, her eyes still swirling with darkness. But beside her, other once familiar figures, friends and family, gathered in the shadows, their expressions mirroring the madness I felt creeping into my own soul. They derived power from my fear, their forms fading and flickering like a faulty projection. Evelyn, they called, their voices a twisted unison filling the chamber with both longing and dread. Home is where your soul thrives. Join us. The invitation crawled under my skin, stitching a tapestry of guilt and longing that burned in my veins. My heart ached to embrace them, yet a darker force whispered this wasn't the reunion I yearned for, this was their snare, a trap of twisted love forged from the very shadows I tried to escape. Yet the hope of connection ignited within the depths, a compulsion that threatened to consume me. Stay with us. They beckoned, arms outstretched, shadowy tendrils snaking closer, eager to pull me into their fold. No. I gasped, shaking my head violently, driving nails of clarity into my mind. You're not real. You're part of them. But even as I shouted, their anguished faces twisted with pain, forever trapped between light and darkness, their souls writhed as though begging to be released. Disgusted, I turned away, yet couldn't stop myself from looking back. Their expressions now morphed into an ensemble of torment, a grotesque mockery of what I had once cherished. Just as the shadows began to close in once more, I saw a pulsating light at the chamber's far end, lurking like a promise waiting to be unveiled. With a surge of determination, I darted towards it, ignoring the chants that echoed around me, beating against my mind with relentless ferocity. The walls whispered their secrets, imploring me to stop, to relent. As I neared the light, it flickered, showing images of a time before the abyss. I saw my sister, laughing, carefree, a beacon of innocence. The shadows recoiled, screamed, the amalgamation of lost spirits erupted into fury, merging into a monstrous entity, forming a grotesque visage of my sister, urging me to join them again. Join us. You cannot escape your fate, nor your family. It wailed, its voice a cacophony of sorrow and rage, but the allure began to crumble as the light pulsed brighter, igniting my resolve. I reached out, fingers stretching as if to grasp that flicker of hope. But just as I reached the verge of touching it, the ground trembled violently, an unsettling earthquake rumbled through the chamber, and the walls began to crack, fissures spreading like wildfire. Suddenly, a flash of darkness shot forward from the horde of lost souls, a vengeful spirit with burning eyes locking onto me. I recoiled, feeling the air grow thick with despair, the oppressive weight of hundreds of lost souls feeding into this newly manifested horror. Evelyn. It bellowed with my sister's voice, soaked in anguish. You will not escape. In that moment, the ground beneath me shattered, and I felt myself falling yet again. Shadows reached up, grasping at my ankles, fingers cold and clammy, wrapping tight. With a heart-stopping realization, I understood I wasn't falling through mere earth but plunging into the very heart of darkness. I was bound to them, thrust downward into an abyss layered with anguish, tragedy, and betrayal. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me was the bittersweet smile of my sister against a backdrop of eternal shadow, and with that haunting gaze, I knew the truth. I was meant to join her, to be enveloped by the darkness forever, and as the final edges of light faded, a chilling echo lingered in the air, clear and resonant, "Welcome home, sister." But as the shadows closed in around me, weaving an intricate tale of despair, a single thought lingered: how many had come before me, and would I forever be another lost soul veiled in darkness? I clawed my way back from the brink, thrust into a world that reeked of damp earth and rancid air. The darkness filled my lungs, suffocating me with its cold embrace. I gasped, sputtering against the thick blanket of shadow, desperately pushing away the tendrils that snaked around me. I blinked against the swirling pitch, unsure of which way was up or down. Panic clawed at my insides as a thin laugh slithered through the darkness, a sound so cruel and taunting, I couldn't shake the sense I was no longer alone, that I could sense them, the souls, ever watchful and scornful. They prowled the shadows, flickering silhouettes against the blackened walls of my prison. Each whispered curse sliced through the thick silence, forming a siren's song that threatened to lull me back into sweet oblivion. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push their cries from my mind, but the insistent murmuring crept in, slithering through the cracks of my resolve. "Join us, they hissed, their voices a haunting echo of what I had just fled. "Evelyn, you cannot resist. You know the truth, you were always meant to be one of us." Images flickered in my mind, overwhelming memories of laughter, the warmth of my home, all twisted, grotesquely contorted into nightmarish realities. Faces I thought I had abandoned appeared, mouths twisted into silent screams. Each one was a nail driving deeper into my heart, each reflection a burden I was not ready to bear. In a fit of desperation, I fumbled through the oppressive darkness, my hands outstretched until they brushed against cold stone. I leaned against it heavily, feeling the rough texture like the rasp of a dying breath. Beneath my fingers, I detected a crack. Fingers trembling, I pried it open wider, hoping for air, hoping for light. As the crevice widened, a faint glow seeped through, pulsing rhythmically like a trapped heartbeat, but the moment my fingers made contact, a surge of energy radiated through the crack, pushing back against my tucha, warning a curse. The walls trembled, and the cacophony of anguished souls crescendoed into a maddening roar. I recoiled, knowing this was no mere matter of chance. The shadows recoiled from the light, howling with fury, as I chose defiance over surrender. Suddenly, the ground beneath me split, sending a jagged staircase spiraling downward into a gaping maw of shadows. I teetered on the edge, then found myself tumbling into a warren of despair, falling through thick darkness as I screamed for clarity, for understanding. But instead, the shadows answered the binding promises of the lost souls, embraced me tighter. I landed hard on ancient bones bleached by time, fragments of lives erased beneath the weight of eternal longing. Around me, the flickering silhouettes of the damned floated, their expressions morphed from anguish to malicious delight. They demanded my attention, desperate for acknowledgement, for companionship in this pit of horror. Broken remnants of whispers tugged at my consciousness, tales of betrayal unveiled themselves in sinister fragments. Stories of a once great prince, betrayed by his father, buried alive within the earth he was destined to inherit. "Come forth, Evelyn," a voice rang clear among the maddening din. I turned, horrified, towards the source, a figure draped in shadow, its face obscured but its eyes glimmering like coals. "You are chosen to uncover his truth. You will reign amongst us, you will awaken him." Fighting against the urge to cower, I shouted back, desperate, "No. I'm not bound to this nightmare. I refuse." The shadows thickened, their laughter rippling around me like a thunderous wave. The figure stepped closer, and I felt a frigid whisper brushing the back of my neck, a promise of power seeping into every breath I took. "His fate is intertwined with yours. Only through his awakening can you reclaim what was lost. As I scrambled to defend my sanity, the floor buckled beneath me, revealing subterranean halls carved from the anguish and rage of interred souls. The ominous glow that flickered through the air grew stronger, beckoning me to venture deeper into the heart of darkness, where the prince lay entombed. Before I could decide, another flash of light exploded into existence, casting the phantoms of the past into stark relief around mid-air faces etched with sorrow, longing, and an insatiable hunger for vengeance. I took hesitant steps forward, pushed by an invisible force, compelled to explore the terrifying truth buried beneath layers of despair. Those souls rose around me, chanting an ancient incantation, their voices mingling into a chorus that turned my blood to ice. Awaken the prince, unveil the truth of bloodlines and betrayal. I plunged into the depths, aware that one wrong turn could drag me into unwelcome arms of eternal night, knowing that I had no choice but to unearth the horrors hidden in the shadows. My heart thundered as the air thickened with anticipation, each breath a montage of fear and revelation, and then, amid the darkness, I saw the looming silhouette of a sarcophagus enveloped in shadows of despair, its golden symbols gleaming ominously in the pale light. A tremor of dread rippled through me as I laid my eyes on the ornate surface, for the whispered stories grew louder, drowning my thoughts. This was not just a grave, it was a prison. A memory surged within me, echo of my sister's voice, shrouded in regret. You cannot save him, Evelyn. He is forever lost to the shadows. But standing before that crypt, I felt the weight of something ancient pressing against my spine. I raised my hand, fingers trembling as they approached the cold stony touch against the unknown when a voice, thunderous and filled with wrath, shattered the silence. You would dare disturb my eternal rest. As the very earth shook around me, shadows erupted from the crypt, rising like smoke, swirling in a menacing dance, revealing a face contorted in a visage that I recognized all too well, the prince. And as my heart raced in fright, his eyes met mine, burning with an insatiable hunger for vengeance and an abyss of despair. You have awakened me, he hissed, a monstrous grin twisting his features. Now face the consequences. The air turned frigid as the truth sunk in like a blade, the prince's malevolence wrapping around me like a noose. It was him, the figure in shadow, bound not just to the earth but to the anguish of a forgotten legacy. My instinct screamed for me to flee, but my feet felt glued to the ground, sinking deeper into the weight of the moment. His features shifted, wavering like smoke in a storm, reflecting the invisible chains that bound him, not just to his crypt, but to the souls clamoring for release, even revenge. I realized with horror that I stood at the precipice of two shattered worlds, me life, teetering on the edge of this nightmare, suffocated by the weight of ancient grief. While fear surged in my veins, the souls turned their attention from the prince to me, their whispers transforming into shouts, a cacophony of rage and desperation. You were meant to save him. Your blood is the key. They screeched, their phantasmal forms swirling around me in frenzied chaos. The prince stepped closer, and I felt the chill of his breath, a harbinger of death, brushing against my skin. You sought power, Evelyn, now you must unleash it. His voice twisted with a furious edge, compelling and melodic, each word stitched with dread. Only then can we escape this eternal prison. By awakening you, I cried, panic retaking control, pouring strength into my voice. What kind of salvation is that? You're a monster. In an instant, the sarcophagus began to tremble, its golden symbols brightening with a pulsing light that mirrored the heartbeat of the shadows. The prince's face warped into a snarl, revealing rows of jagged teeth. A monster? Or a harbinger of truth? You feel it too, don't you? The hunger for power? It flows from me to you, tendrils of dark energy coiled like serpents toward me, their whispers coaxing, luring me deeper into the prince's desire. I felt the familiar sensation of temptation clenching around my heart, promising strength beyond anything I could comprehend. Yet even in the depths of my soul, I could sense the tormented cries of the souls surrounding me, their longing intertwined with dread. Barely able to think, I withdrew a step, the chains of destiny tightening around my throat. I want. I'll find another way. I shouted, though conviction wavered with each pulse of the shadows. The energy wavered, and the prince's laughter echoed around me, cold and unyielding, his form flickered as if unstable, oscillating between power and despair. You think you can resist? I am the retribution they've waited centuries for. He reached out to me, fingers stretched, reminding me of promises made in darkness of relinquishing control. As if sensing my hesitation, the spirits of the damned grew restless, rising in a whirlwind around us, their voices turning into a tempest of chaos. Choose. Awaken the prince, or let us remain captives of shadows. They wailed, their forms blurring the lines of reality, spiraling into an entangled dance of torment and hope. The symbol of the sarcophagus blazed brighter, igniting with an intensity that seared my vision. I closed my eyes, engulfed by the shouts of the restless spirits and the whisper of my own heart. Rage swelled within me. I had to resist, had to fight against whatever allure the prince offered, and in that moment of desperation, I craved clarity, the truth that was mine to uncover. I raked my fingers across the cold surface of the sarcophagus, seeking anything that could give me leverage over the darkness surrounding me. As I touched the cold stone, a surge of chilling energy flooded through my fingertips. I saw visions, fleeting yet vivid, a throne drenched in blood, a family torn apart by secrets, betrayal weaving jagged threads through deep shadows. The darkness wrapped around me like a living entity, forcing me to confront the weight of ignorance I had borne. Then, I felt the vibration of an ancient curse trying to break through, an echo of the prince's past beckoning me. My breath caught in my throat as what I had inadvertently unearthed became terrifyingly clear. Whatever fate had befallen the prince was tied intricately to my own bloodline, Evelyn. A voice, smoky and alluring, purred through the chaos. When I opened my eyes, the prince's face was closer, raw power radiating from him, pulsing through the shadows. You can be my salvation. The throne awaits, the others will not let you leave without their reckoning. And just as the final words spilled from his lips, the earth shook violently. With a deafening crack, the sarcophagus splintered apart, viscous shadows pooling like liquid tar around us, consuming everything in their path. In sheer terror, I clutched at the remnants of the golden designs, desperate to hold on to something real. But the prince's gaze remained locked on mine, filled with a promise that could curl the very soul. Choose wisely, child of shadows, for your time is slipping away. With that, the very walls of reality began to fracture, and in the whoosh of disintegrating darkness, I felt the air grow heavy with despair. I was swept toward the edge of an abyss, the shadows licking at my heels, a dark promise granting what I never knew I sought, binding my fate to something that could unravel the very essence of who I was. Just then, I heard a sound that sent ice through my veins. From somewhere deep within the shadows, a chorus of wretched souls cried in unison, a harmonized torment resonating through the very marrow of my bones. Evelyn, the truth will consume you. And I fell into the void, deeper into the echoes of my own unraveling fate, with the prince's haunting words trailing behind me, lingering like a promise of terrifying revelations yet to come. I awoke from the suffocating darkness. The shadows had released me, spitting me out into a harsh reality, though not the one I anticipated. The damp cellar that had invoked such terror now welcomed me back. It was unsettlingly quiet, and the air was heavy with an acrid scent of decay mixed with something sweetly sinister. My heart raced, and my brain struggled to comprehend the reality that greeted me. In a panicked haze, I scrambled to my feet, expecting a presence, yet finding the shadows still. The gilded coffin now lay eerily still, the lid askew, as if it had willingly bled me back into existence just to tantalize me with a sense of false security. I caught my breath, trying to process the haunting images echoing in my mind: me sister's betrayal, her tormented whisper beckoning, intertwined with the prince's sinister promise. But there was something else, a distant whisper, one that caressed my ears gently. It flowered amidst the silence, weaving into my skin. You cannot escape the destiny of blood, it purred, rich and sweet, like an embrace from the past made flesh. Nobody stood before me, yet, as if conjured by my despair, shadows began to crawl up from the cracks in the cellar walls, intertwining with memories that gnawed at my insides. I staggered backward against the cold stone of the wall. No, you can't do this. I shouted, but my voice felt small, quickly engulfed by the encroaching fog of darkness. The whispers grew louder, frantic with a shared hunger. You belong to us. They echoed, weaving through my thoughts, and suddenly, I knew what they were after me: desperation to protect my sister, to save what was lost. I was tethered to a lineage steeped in darkness, an ancestral bond that reached through the Ajisa damning power that surged through my veins. Come and learn. The shadows pulsed with excitement, drawing me towards the coffin, a morbid invitation laced with betrayal. Reluctantly, I felt the pull as if I were the moth, fluttering toward the flame, and then I saw him. The prince. He was no longer just a shadowy figment, he loomed large, real and terrifying, the remnant of my lapse into destiny manifested before my eyes. You have returned, he hissed, jagged teeth bared in a twisted grin. You awakened me, little sister, let me go. I pleaded, but my voice betrayed me, the desperation clawing at my throat tightening until I could barely breathe. Yet the echoes of tortured souls thrummed through me, a symphony of anguish binding my fate to this moment. Why would you want to escape the truth? The prince responded, each word laced with an insidious sweetness. And I realized, in that moment of dread-soaked clarity, that I would never be free until the cycle was severed. Suddenly, buried deep within me, I felt the remnants of ancestral power stir, my blood a potent elixir for the hungry shadows. Release me, or they will consume us both. I cried, heart racing as shadows danced in anticipation, eager to merge with my essence to reclaim what had been lost. What makes you think I will let you go? His voice was coiled with mockery, powerful and intoxicating. Your sister dances in the shadows alongside me. Her laughter becomes part of the cacophony of despair that feeds us. Tortured visions swirled, unchecked, my sister, a mere wisp of who she had been, her moments stolen, her essence devoured by the very darkness that now beckoned me. Rage ignited anew within, might surged like wildfire, would not be bound by bloodlines steeped in betrayal. Not by him, or by whispers encasing the darkness. I thrust my hands toward the gilded coffin, the last remnants of this cursed line, and with a defiant scream, I uttered the incantations that surged forth from the depths of my being. I will break the cycle. You do not own me. The shadows recoiled as I clasped my hands together, light erupting from my palms, blinding and holy against the tainted darkness, unearthing the weight of ages past. The prince staggered back with disbelief, his darkened form flickering and wavering. No. He shrieked, the darkness around him erupting into a frenzy. The phantoms gave voice to their confusion and anger, the spirals of darkness collapsing into themselves. I could see the ancient curse weakening under the weight of my rebellion, echoing in a chorus of tortured cries as the light began to seize dominion over the shadows. Suddenly, the cellar trembled violently. The gilded coffin shook, and the figures of tortured souls writhed. They grasped at me desperately, voices rising in pitched desperation, wanting to be freed. No! You cannot do this. They couldn't bear to lose their grip on the prince, but I knew what needed to be done. Overwhelming light poured from my being, as memories of my sister surged forth. Her laughter, her warmth, all now entangled in this dance of tendrils between light and shadow. I redeem you, my sister. I set you free. In an earth-shattering explosion, I was torn from the grip of despair I had been bound to for so long. I felt the fabric of existence stretching and snapping, lifting the veil over the darkness that had shackled us both. As the shadows screamed and were swept away, I watched the last flicker of the prince contort into a scream of rage and despair. He dissolved back into the abyss like smoke in the wind, taking with him the binding chains I had fought against all that time. Then, silence enveloped me again. The dust settled, and the echo of despair faded. I fell to my knees, grasping the cold stone floor, gasping for air. Had I truly set myself free? Or had I merely broken one chain, only to forge another? And at that moment, a curious voice echoed within the now empty cellar, a whisper so hauntingly familiar. Evelyn, it called, laced with warmth yet twisted by darkness. The words wrapped around me, constricting my will. You may have undone the chains of the prince, but you have become part of something much greater, much darker. The walls, once drenched in despair, erupted into images swirling in a haunting pattern, showing glimpses of future bloodlines birthed from shadows. My heart sank. Though he was gone, the darkness remained, and it would always seek new vessels. With a chill creeping down my spine, I turned to the now sullied crack in the wall, where echoes of despair murmured once more. "They will come for you, Evelyn," my sister's voice twisted through the shadows. "Sooner or later you will join us," and as realization clawed at my throat, I understood the darkness was never truly vanquished. The haunting job of bloodlines laced in betrayal would continue, inherited and eternal. The final wall whispered its words of torment, and I stood paralyzed, rooted in dread. The chilling last line echoed in my mind like a final requiem, a parting thought that would linger endlessly, a cruel reminder that the shadows within would forever intertwine with the legacy of my blood. I am the shadow, and the shadow is me.